All right, hello, LinkedIn and YouTube. We are live again today, and we're going to talk about a really interesting and timely topic about a human firewall and how we can strengthen the human firewall as well as a business continuity. So we've got some really great guests on here today. We've got Nikhil Kamboj, the founder of Databox 360, which is a cybersecurity consultancy supporting all UK businesses globally. We've got Amy Payne, Cyber Protect and Prevent Officer for Kent Police. She's got over 12 years of experience with Kent Police. Javad Malik, Security Awareness Advocate at KnowBe4. Javad's a Security Awareness Advocate for EMEA at KnowBe4. And Tom Notley, Head of Channel at Databarracks, UK Specialist on Business Continuity and IT Disaster Recovery Provider. So I highly encourage everybody to join this LinkedIn session to see how companies are performing while sophisticated phishing attacks are constantly on the rise. We've got attacks up by, I think, 700% in the last 3 months alone. And it's actually never been more important to strengthen the human firewall and business continuity protocols. So before I bring on our first guest, I'd like to just ask everybody to let me know where you're tuning in from, because I think that's always interesting to see where people are tuning in from. And if you've got specific questions around business continuity, cybersecurity, building up or strengthening your firewall, absolutely ask us in the LinkedIn comments, and we're going to address as many questions as possible. So without further ado, I'm actually going to bring in Nick to the show. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Kate. How are you doing?
Doing very well. How are you?
Very well. Thank you.
Well, welcome to the show. I love your banner there, Databox 360. You're very prepared from a home office. I love it.
Yes, I think as the time's passing by, we're getting more and more used to and ready, and I'm moving more stuff from the office back to my home office. So, yeah, it's always helpful to have that in the background when we're doing some new client meetings. But no, just I'll improve my background. I won't have to use the fake one.
Yes, absolutely. You're actually inspiring me to get my own story by data background or something. Before we start the session, I do want you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and about Databox 360 and what kind of services do you offer to the public.
Sure. So I'm Nick. I'm one of the directors at Databox 360. We started the cybersecurity consulting business last year. And this is, by the way, our third live event within the last few months or during the lockdown. So Databox 360, we provide professional cybersecurity, risk advisory, and compliance services to businesses, not just in the UK, all around if they have offices in other parts of the world. So mainly combined expertise on board. We've got about 30 years of expertise within information security, insurance, and risk advisory. So we privileged working with some of the reputable businesses around the country, and some of them include from purely sectors where there's a manufacturing business, there's a recruitment business, there's an insurance firm. So all the businesses, we just recently dealing with a council and also a large charity. So yeah, we try and provide a very bespoke service. So we work with the business to understand what the threats and risks are purely for that, and then based on that, we design solutions and try and build a solution for
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. So I know that what we're talking about today is the human firewall, and I think it might make sense to start with the definition. What exactly is a human firewall?
Sure. So that's an interesting term, and I think we use it a lot. I was trying to find the hashtag human firewall, so I'm surprised it's not used massively on LinkedIn, but we are very actively using it. And what it really means is because every organization invests millions of pounds and thousands of pounds or dollars in securing their networks, in securing their infrastructure, especially within the recent times where they've had to extend outside their offices and securing protocols when most of their staff are working remotely. Now, for any chief information security officer or any executive in a business, the biggest challenge is to protect the data assets, to protect the assets, not just within the business now, they are basically, outside as well. So the human firewall, when we say that, we refer to the employees of the business. We refer to any stakeholder who is actually accessing the network. You go well and good, you got all the technologies and you've got all the layers, like an onion approach, you've got all the security layers. But what it really comes down to in the end is the human who are using it. So all the employees and your suppliers. So your security can topple over if any of the human elements, and you click on a link and there goes your security. So
yes, I know, it's so dangerous. You
yeah,
can make all these investments in all the great technology, but you've got that one human who's just going to say, "Ooh, link, click," and then all that goes out the window, right? So we've got a question here from James, who's asking, "What's the right mix of technology with human firewalls? Is it more technology or more training?"
With the human firewall, what we have seen, especially purely working with our clients and our vendor KnowBe4, who don't need any introduction, but they are globally, like Gartner and Forrester ranking #1. So what we've seen is it's a mixture of both. A lot of businesses implement their own security trainings, and there are a lot of free resources as well that are online as well for businesses to use. But what it comes down to is what we've seen is it has to be consistent, it has to be recorded, and it has to be risk-based. So using technology or using a solution that records all of that is what we recommend, where you have to evaluate every single employee's risk factor and work on that. So I would say it's a mixture, and it's continuous training.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think given our current situation or what we've experienced in the past 3 or 4 months, can you comment what you've seen in the marketplace? Like, what are some of your observations around how COVID has impacted this space?
Absolutely. I think the biggest impact we've seen is that the criminals are investing, and they've invested heavily back in February time, and nobody keeps fingers on the pulse more than those guys, and they were investing heavily into the infrastructure to build expertise in facilitating these phishing scams and exploiting these vulnerabilities based around COVID-19. So we've seen a lot of our clients receiving, I mean, as you said, 700% increase in this phishing email. That is true, and our customers have experienced that as well, where they're getting a lot of fake emails and some really hard to spot as well. So that's definitely one of the impacts.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We've got another question here. Akil's asking, when we talk about phishing, it seems more of clicking links. So can't these be filtered into email servers?
Yes, they can be filtered. So this is where what we are seeing is standard Office 365 filters or any other technology that you use. So these are getting very complicated and very advanced. So I have seen a lot of these. They will just sneak through all those nets that you have, and even be sometimes what we saw with one particular client, one of their suppliers got compromised, their network was compromised, and their user was a legit person that used to deal with the business on a daily basis. Their mailbox got compromised, and the emails were received from them. Now you cannot filter, block an email from a trusted email address, and that's one of the problems. So that's where it comes down to the human element. It comes down to your experience in spotting those different and the training itself.
Yeah, I guess you can do it to an extent, right? It still goes back to the training.
Absolutely.
All right. I think at this point, I'm going to bring on Amy Payne to the show.
Hello. Hi. Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Another one with a great background. This is amazing.
Thank you.
So Amy, welcome to the show. I think I'm really looking forward to hear your observations from a Kent police officer, well, cyber protect and prevent officer for Kent Police. Before we get into this, maybe give our audience a little bit of a background about what you do and about Kent Police.
So my role is, as I said, a cyber protect and prevent officer. Actually, we have cyber protect and prevent officers out of the whole of the UK police. So every police force within the UK will have one of me or several of me working within their organisation. And basically, obviously, you know, we're there to offer that support and guidance to businesses, individuals as well. So obviously we're seeing a lot of victims and actually just sometimes they just need that little bit of support and guidance. So that's really where my roles come from. I've worked in Kent Police for a very long time. In this particular role, I've worked in Kent Police in this role for about 3.5 years. Obviously, we get a lot of training, but I'm not an IT professional. I'm from a policing background, so it's a constant learning. I've joined this role and realised that cybersecurity is pretty fast paced, and I have to keep up. And every day is a new challenge. Every day something new I see. And obviously, as a team, we sit down and obviously discuss a lot of the cases that we see. So we do have a team of several officers. So we have something called the 4P approach. So the 4P approach is protect, prevent, pursue, and prepare. So that's our 4Ps that we follow. So part of the prevent role is I actually work with a lot of young children who have technical abilities, who have actually crossed the line into cybercrime. So my role at that area is to ensure that we keep those children on track and make sure that we don't they don't go across the line into cybercrime, and we give them lots of access to things that they can utilise their skills in the right ways rather than the wrong. And then the protect side, as I said, is just the business community.
Yeah, so it is very interesting. I know we spoke about this briefly in one of our prep calls, but tell the audience a little bit more about these little genius children who are trying to hack.
Yeah.
I mean, this is very interesting. I think people want to hear about this.
So we have obviously children. So one of the ones that we speak about. So there was a police force in the UK that had to drop a lot of their cases because the children were under the age of criminal responsibility. So they're under the age of 10. So they were committing crime, cyber crime. So they're able to hack into systems and do all sorts. So I do have children as young as that I'm working with as 13 who have the ability to do a lot of damage, and our job is to make sure that we keep them on the right track. We want them on the good side, and that's what our aim is with that.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I have children, and I guess I kind of hope that they'll be smart enough at age 10 or 13 to do something like this. When I was 10, well, let's not get into what I was doing when I was 10, but I wasn't that smart, I guess. So what are some of the trends that you've seen? I know Nick mentioned, and confirmed that 700% increase in phishing attacks. So what have you seen as a result of COVID?
So we've seen obviously a marked increase in ransomware. We have seen, and obviously we see a lot of processes where we see a lot of malicious scam campaigns. So obviously phishing emails and things like that. But actually we have seen where they have been attacking the RDP, so the remote desktop protocol. So we have seen that, and that's quite new. It's not new, but it's something we've seen quite regularly. So it's kind of making sure that the business community are aware of that particular protocol and making sure that they lock that down and obviously make sure they secure that area. Also, as well, we've seen a little bit of a trend with things like when they're getting into emails, they're changing the forwarding rules so that they're getting a copy of emails, and you wouldn't necessarily know that that's happening unless you kind of, have been a victim. So we've seen that a lot. And also as well, my absolute bugbear, social media. So we see a lot of spear phishing attacks, and the reason that happens is because we are quite free of our social media. Social media is a great thing. We have to use it in the right way. So my bugbear is actually people making sure they look at their social media and look at the processes and make sure they secure it properly and set the privacy settings correctly. Because actually, a cyber criminal can actually socially engineer businesses, and then the businesses need to really think about social media policies within their organizations.
Yeah, and we're using social media properly today, right? With our LinkedIn Live. Hopefully, yes. Another question for you is, what would you say are some of the top tips? And Nick, maybe you can address this one as well. What are some tips that people and companies can execute maybe today to decrease some of that risk?
Okay, so my one top tip would be, please go and look on the National Cyber Security Centre website. It has got so much information on there for businesses, small and medium businesses, large organisations. There's lots of things on there. Even if you're not UK based, you can still use that. It's there, it's available, it's UK based, it's government backed. It's where I get all my information from. It's where we get all advice from, and we work very closely with the National Cyber Security Centre. So please get yourself on there. My other thing, top tip, train your staff, please. Because you can have the top-notch cybersecurity, but actually if you've got a member of staff clicking away and opening attachments and links, you know, what can we do?
Yeah.
I totally back that. Absolutely. I think absolutely what we're seeing as well is that it's the security culture that you have to build within the organization, and that comes with continuous training from the top. You have to cover all of your employees and your important stakeholders, not just some, because you cannot leave any exposures. So yeah, totally back that, and we recommend that link as well to our customers because it's an amazing NCSE resource. There's some really good stuff there. The other thing is because all businesses are relying on their vendors at the moment, and a lot of the businesses are unable to operate. So you have to not just look after keep an eye on your business, but also your key vendors. So we've seen so many businesses who are unable to operate now. So yeah, just make sure their cyber health is also as good as yours. So change your supplier monitoring processes to include that. And finally, there's obviously investing in compliance, where you can start by Cyber Essentials and go all the way up to, there's very well-known standards. So and they're evidence that your infrastructure is top-notch.
Yeah, Cyber Essentials is, if you're UK based, Cyber Essentials is a great thing, and actually the government won't work with you unless you have a Cyber Essentials certification. So, and one of my other top tips as well is, if you do outsource your IT, which we see a lot of in the UK, please have those conversations with your IT companies. Ask the questions about, what they're, Cyber Essentials, what they're doing with your data. Have those conversations. Don't be afraid to ask. You're paying them to outsource your IT. It's okay to ask those questions. So really have those conversations with your IT if you do outsource.
Yeah, thank you for that, guys. We have a question here from Akil about a trend of SIM swapping fraud in the US and UK. Yeah. And I actually had to look that up while you guys were talking, because I wasn't familiar with SIM swap. I don't know if you, I don't know if you are, but have you seen a trend of this? I guess in the UK.
The first one I came across was very recently, and it was a bit of a challenge actually, because it's quite difficult to. Some mobile companies are very good. And others aren't so good. So this particular one wasn't so good. So it's really hard to get that information back. And actually she wasn't able to. And the issue was that she did enable things like two-factor authentication. So everything she was trying to reconnect to, it was sending the authentication to that mobile device. So they were getting all the authentication messages and numbers. So that was a real issue. But the one thing we can ask with SIM swapping and things like that, what we can ask is that they make sure they have like a PIN or a password set up for those individuals.
Thank you for that. Before we bring in our next guest, maybe Nick, do you want to give a little overview of why because this whole webinar was truly your idea and you brought the entire team together. So, for those who have joined us today, maybe let them know what your goal here is.
Absolutely. No, thanks for asking that, Kate. Because I think the main reason for this webinar was to bring in, obviously, Amy's expertise as a guest speaker to really put it out there that what exactly is happening, what kind of cybercrime trends are currently happening, not just within the UK, I think, and the patterns are the same. So thanks for sharing that, Amy, and we look forward to even discussing a bit more of that. And then we we're really privileged to be working with some of the top vendors in the world, and we've brought on board today with us two of those vendors. One's KnowBe4, who are I'm truly passionate about. Because my past before founding the company was I was the IT director for a company, and I deployed the technology. So KnowBe4 is one of the best solutions out there to train your employees in cybersecurity awareness. So that's how we want to bring it in, and that basically strengthens your human firewall. And then on the side, if you happen to be the unfortunate business where you have been hit by a ransomware attack or any kind of disaster, then that's where our second partner, who are with us today, Databarracks, come in to assist. They step in to assist, and I have experienced that, by the way. So they are brilliant with disaster recovery, and lately with the business continuity planning, where I think we're going to learn a bit more from Tom later on, that not every business is fully, ready for any kind of, especially pandemic. We've seen, we were not expecting what's happening now. So that said, these things will happen and it's only going to get worse. So yeah, that's the storyline. So I hope that comes out from today's event.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that was very helpful. So without further ado, I'm gonna bring Javad Malik into the show. Hello, Javad.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. You don't have a background for KnowBe4. What's happening here?
No, but you know what? As a kid, I was always far more interested in the villains in movies, the bad guys. So
Okay.
I got like Darth Vader and an alien. I got Heisenberg. Next to it is Rules of Fight Club. And leave in the comments where you think that quote on the wall is from. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. First one to win at the end, Nick will give them a prize. but I think
Databox little thing behind that they can use in their videos, or
yeah.
That's funny.
I think it was this obsession with bad guys and villains that actually, growing up, got me more interested in cybersecurity, because I was fascinated by, a good villain always has a justification for what they're doing, and there's a story arc related to it. So it got me interested in what drives bad guys in our industry, and it got me into what are the methods they use. And a lot of it just boils down to the human factor and how they're using those ploys to try and make people take actions that are not in their or their organization's best interest. And that's what drew me to KnowBe4.
Great, thank you for that. We actually have James saying Karate Kid. Is this accurate? That's Cobra Kai. I don't know.
It is. Cobra Kai were the bad faction in the Karate Kid. So yeah, kids of the 80s will only remember.
Yes. Okay, so KnowBe4, I know Nick provided a brief intro, but do you want to just tell the audience a bit more about what you do for KnowBe4 and what does the company offer for their customers?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a security advocate for KnowBe4. Some of my peers in my team, they like to call themselves evangelists. I think that doesn't translate across the pond as well, so I just prefer the term advocate. But it's not a marketing role. It's not a sales role. It's really just engaging with the community and our users, helping understand what some of their challenges are, offering some tips for them. And it doesn't even need to translate into a sale, but it's all about sharing the knowledge and the information we have. I myself have worked in the security industry my entire career, so that's despite my youthful young looks. I have been working in the industry for about 20 years now. Hard to believe, I know, but
shocker! Oh my God, what?
Yes.
You don't look a day over 18. Hold on.
I know. I have Benjamin Button disease, but yeah, I think as a company, what we do is we help train users to make better risk decisions. That's how I ultimately boil it down to. Of course, like we do the simulated phishing, which is a big component because phishing is a big challenge for companies. And then we do all the security awareness training on the back end of that. But ultimately, what if you look at that, those are just the how we do, but the why is really, we want people to make better security decisions so that even if in the absence of any information, they know what a scam looks like or what are the bad choices in life to do and to avoid them.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful, the simulated phishing. I've actually been a part of a company where I guess they had another company come in. I'm not sure if it was KnowBe4 or somebody else, but we were phished, right, as for fun, I guess, just to see who's going to click the link and who's going to report it to the right compliance department. And the results showed that we were just not prepared for attacks, and people clicked the links and put the organization at potential risk. And I think that training those individuals is just so important. Got a comment here, a question here from James. Are all the new work from home folks more exposed and vulnerable now? And what should be done? You got budget to ramp up one more area, more technology or more training? What would you say?
Wow, that's a bit of a mouthful. That's like 3 questions in one. So I think what we see is that there are many factors at play here. So it's a complex web. People haven't suddenly decided to work remotely because it's the ethical thing to do. It's companies have been forced into this position. A lot of them are under constraints. Some of them have had to furlough or lay off some people in the interim. Technology teams are constrained in what they can and cannot deploy as well. They can't get to the offices. They don't maybe have access to remote users. Maybe not every user has been issued a corporate device. So I think given all these constraints and the fact that people are very anxious as well, people are uncertain about the coronavirus, they're uncertain about the economy, they're uncertain about a whole bunch of things. So what we see a lot is the attackers are preying on this uncertainty and the anxieties that people have. So we've seen a large uptick in phishing sort of attacks against people saying, hey, where your IT team install this VPN. And someone's like, okay, the IT team is saying install this VPN. Just actually like last week, my mum she called me. So I work in the back, the house is over there. And she called me, she said, oh, come quickly. I said, what? And she goes, it's BT on the phone and they're saying that our line's been compromised and they're going to disconnect us unless you know, and I'm like, no, Mom, I've told you this a million times. Like, nothing of the sort's going to happen. So, we hung up. But these are the things that people are taking advantage of because they know everyone's working from home. We need our internet connection. So we'll do anything to preserve that. So in all of this, I think having the right procedures in place, your organization having those communication channels, like this is how we're going to communicate with you. This is what we expect of you. This is how you can communicate with us vertically and horizontally within the organization. And these are some of the scams that are out there. I'm not saying force them to go on a complete security awareness course, but just make them aware through whatever means it is, just like an email or a short video, whatever. You just say, look, these are some of the threats that are out there. Just be aware of them. If in doubt, report it to your IT team, seek help. Don't just willy-nilly give up your credentials or other data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to ask, do you have any, maybe not statistics, but what works better? Is it an in-person training that's more effective, an email, a short video that you send around to your employees? What have you seen as a more effective approach?
So as an organization, we have a SaaS model, so everything's delivered through the cloud in terms of videos and posters and what have you. But that's just the delivery mechanism. Ultimately, I think it matters less about the channel you're adopting and more about how relevant the content is and how engaging it is. Very often, so a colleague of mine, he often says, just because I'm aware, it doesn't mean that I care. Yeah. So it's a bit like me driving down the road and I see a road sign that says 30 miles per hour. And well, okay, now I'm aware that the speed limit is 30 miles per hour. Do I care? Well, I'm not going to answer that with a police officer on this call.
I was going to say 80's right here. Come on.
But you see that sometimes for some people that's not enough to get them to change behavior. So the actual goal isn't really to make people encyclopedias of security. We don't want them to become security experts. We want them to adopt secure behaviors. So whichever mechanism works for that. And the two things I think is like, one is you can't change tons of behaviors at the same time. You can only change like a couple of behaviors at any one point in time. If you've ever tried like making radical changes to your life, like I'm going to eat clean, work out, and sleep less, you know, you might achieve one of those out of the three for an extended
period. Days, yeah.
Maybe. So only focus on a couple of behaviors. And the second thing, it needs to be consistent and repeated over a long period of time. When I was young, there was the "don't forget to clink" on every trip, the seatbelt ad, and that was repeated every time, or whether it's on a boat poster, radio, or TV. So we got into the habit. Okay, we got to put on our seatbelts. So and there was like some shock videos on TV as well, showing dummies going through windows and exploding and what have you. But now that's a learned behavior. So my children, they get into the car, they see me putting on my seatbelts, my wife putting on, they automatically put on their seatbelts, or they ask us to help them. So that's a learned behavior. They're not even necessarily aware of why or the underlying mechanics of it, but it's a cultural shift within the household and it's a learned behavior. And that's what we want to try to get into organizations. Like if leadership adopts certain values, if the organization culture adopts certain values, then new employees will start adopting those values, and they'll take it home as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that analogy. I think it's really helpful to talk about things people can relate to, right? Like seatbelts. My kids definitely don't question anything. They're like, this is what we do. They don't know why. They don't really care why. They're like, this is part of everyday life. We do have a couple of interesting questions on LinkedIn, but before we address more questions there, I'm actually going to bring Tom Notley into the show.
Hello.
Tom. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out. We're all here now, so now it's a party.
No, it's good. Yeah, no, it's gone. Thanks very much for having me along today. It's been really great sitting here listening to you guys. I've been learning loads. It's been fantastic. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts so far on the things that we discussed?
Yeah, no, really, really interesting and really going well done, Nick, to sort of put this together. I think, we get heavily involved in, one really important aspect of dealing with these kind of problems, or certainly the results, the consequences of these problems and these attacks. But it's always good to see, sort of understand it or talk about it in a much more holistic sense. As we've discussed a couple of times, it's not a silver bullet. There's no, individual solution. It's a combination of different technological solutions, different human approaches and training behaviors, and also really, really good backup plans, if with the best will in the world, those two key areas fail. So I think it's great to get everybody together and to kind of cover off the different areas, because, they're all really key.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you again for joining us. Maybe we start things off with, who is Tom, what's Databarracks, and what do you guys do? Yeah,
so I'm Tom. I'm the partner manager, channel manager at Databarracks. Been there for a couple of years now. They're a great team, and what Databarracks is all about really is IT business continuity. So backup, disaster recovery, and then business continuity in the more holistic sense of the word, from a documentation and process point of view. We've been doing it for more than 15 years now. We've been really careful to focus solely in that area, and really try to become experts in it and understand it completely. And really everything that we do within that space is around taking the the workload and the risk off the plate of the company and delivering it as a completely end-to-end managed service. The idea being that, rather than, to use an analogy, train up internally and have a really good first aider, it's kind of like having the doctor. The guys that do it day in, day out, they're trained to do it. And we do a good job of it because we've done it, many times before.
Yeah, thanks for that. And so you mentioned business continuity and disaster recovery. Can you just tell the audience the difference between those two? They're typically grouped together, but I'm sure there's a difference.
Yeah, and actually, I've been in the industry many years, and in my previous role, I was guilty of doing the same thing. I think the simplest way of looking at it is that IT disaster recovery is typically talking about a sort of a technological solution that's about failing over and minimizing the downtime of the key applications and servers, and the mechanics, the technical mechanics that users use to do what they're doing in a day-to-day fashion. So we talk about failing over servers, we talk about spinning up data in a different location, we talk about connecting users to that, and the ITDR plan is really the documentation that helps an IT leader or a business leader invoke that strategy and that plan. Really, that should be a component part of a wider business continuity plan. It's a small piece, if you want, of a much wider puzzle. And when we talk about business continuity planning, that's much more holistic across the whole business. So we, all different departments, from HR, through to accounting, as well as IT and sales, and all the core departments are affected by good business continuity and having those plans in place. So it's a much broader set of documents and processes, of which ITDR is one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. We've got a question here from Kirk. Aside from corporations, individual knowledge of phishing schemes need to also be improved upon. So what recommendations would you give to young users in particular? And more importantly, how can private estates use this knowledge to protect their property and assets? So I know, we started to focus on corporations, but how can we educate individual users?
Yeah, well, I mean, so from my perspective, I think we've touched on it quite a lot. The advancements in these kind of attacks is really staggering. I mean, particularly around the level of social engineering, or the level of a run-up that people will take to target a specific person. So, they might learn if they are targeting a corporation, what the diary is of that individual board member, or when they're going to be in the office, when they're going to be out of the office, where they're going on holiday, and it's quite unbelievable actually, the level of preparation that these guys will go to when you talk about spear phishing, to have a really targeted attack. I think that the only real thing that you can do around that, aside from all of the technological solutions, is to have a really great training that's repetitive, and keep that awareness up, because it's really an arms race. The level of threat, the level of technology increases. It's not a static picture. It's not like this is the problem, let's just work on fixing it. It's a constant battle to keep with the new techniques being deployed. So it's a conversation that needs to be ever engaged in. So good communication, good training, and repeat and repeat and repeat.
Knowledge is power, as I say. Knowledge is power. And we've got stats to say like 80% of a lot of these attacks can be reduced just by being aware of them. So knowledge is definitely power.
Absolutely. Yeah, Amy, I was going to ask you, because the question was specifically around younger users, and I know you're working closely with those, but from a different perspective, right, where you're trying to prevent them from potentially committing crimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is tricky, because kids are, they devour technology. I'm still learning. I've got children that devour technology. I think it's having those open conversations with your children about technology and how to use it correctly. I think one of the things that hasn't really been looked at, and that's obviously why we're doing this, is actually committing offences. A lot of the children that we see are committing things like distributed denial of service, so DDoS attacks, and they do it to each other for gaming purposes. And you might think that's completely innocent and think, I've booted an opponent offline because they booted me offline. But actually, that's a criminal offence. That's a Computer Misuse Act, and you're committing an offence. And children don't realise they're doing that. And how many kids have got gaming and they're like talking about that? It's an offence. So again, it's having those conversations, being aware what the law says, and that's really what my role is about awareness and getting in early as well, because I think these children are very, very talented at a very young age. So my key area is getting in at a young age.
Just to make, come on that point, I think that really, really highlights the scale of development. Going from, not that long ago, a denial of service attack would be, a relatively kind of, technically planned out thing that, a sophisticated criminal would use to target organisations still do. And now we're at a point where, kids are doing it each other to knock them out of online gaming. I think that shows you the scale of progress and increase in the regularity and the normalization of these kind of attacks. It's amazing. It's crazy. It's scary.
It is. And I think to Amy's point, knowledge is the ultimate key, because there are so many technological channels out there for kids, especially. You can't. You're probably not aware of half the platforms that your kids can use to access, get in contact with other people. So it's not just about email. It's like, well, how do you stop them from falling victim to a phishing attack through their gaming console chat program, or how do you, or one of these new obscure social media platforms that you've not heard about. So it is very much, I think, we often look to technology as a first, like, well, how do we do it? Can I put some monitoring software on my phone and what have you? But I mean, just from personal experience as a parent, I think it's more of a parenting issue where, you need to have that conversation with them, explain to them what's right, what's wrong, and when to come to you for something that's, doesn't feel right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this next question from Russell makes a point that I was just going to make, that it's not only children, right? It could be, so I'll read the question. So he's noticed a distinct increase in number of robo-phishing calls to home lines since the imposed working from home isolation measures have been imposed. Seems that phishing attackers are specifically targeting this route, expecting many now work from home. And I guess he's looking for your comments on that. And I think most of the people who actually have a home line tend to be the older population, right? And I think in addition to children, I think that's also a very highly targeted demographic. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think absolutely. I think Javad has touched on that earlier, and I think we all have, in a way, that the last 3 or 4 months have put into perspective the challenges. Remote workplace has always been a challenge for any information technology or security leader within such a short period of time, as a lot of the companies were not ready to be operating in this mode for more than. Well, it used to be just a business continuity, which normally you would expect will only run for a short period of time. Now we've been working for most of us for 3 months. And this is where I think Grant touched on a very important point, the psychological pressure as well. Because remotely working staff, they're also not just, there's this psychological pressure that's making them more susceptible, and that's actually helping the bad guys succeed in more cases than they normally would. So for any of the information security leaders who are responsible for their business network security, there's a lot more on their heads. So VPN is one there, but yeah, absolutely. I think there's this mixture of things that we need to put in place to contain that, including awareness training and good continuity planning.
I also think, to this, whichever phishing attack mechanism they're coming through, as social engineering, whatever, whether it's the phone, whether it's email, whether it's what have you, and whether you're in the office or at home, I think there's 2 ways. Well, the best way to look at it, I think NCSC, as Amy mentioned them before, they have a really good layered defense model on how to prevent phishing, and I think it's really well articulated, because the first step is make it difficult for criminals to actually reach your users. So that includes your email gateways, or hiding phone numbers, or filtering them and what have you. The second layer is that awareness and training of your users and education, so that if it does bypass it and gets to them, they know what to do. And hopefully that's the right thing, either I delete it or report it. And then number 3 is minimize the impact if they do fall victim to it. And number 4 is have recovery procedures in place. So I think from an organizational level, you should be looking at that from a holistic level and make sure you have that kind of level in place to cover all your attack avenues. And a model like this actually gives you good defense in depth and avoids the dreaded expense in depth, where you're just spending, willy-nilly on products that might not necessarily give you that depth that you truly need.
Yeah, you mentioned expenses, and I actually wanted to bring up ROI from all of the, the trainings and the simulated phishing and basically all these prevention tactics that we can leverage. Do we have ROI statistics or anything that we can share? Because I think it's an interesting space where if nothing bad happens, then you don't know if your software or your training was the reason nothing bad happened. But if something bad does happen, then it's okay. Obviously, it's their fault. The training wasn't good, or the hardware or the software wasn't great enough. What are your thoughts on that, and how do we justify this to the business and make them aware of the need?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. I mean, we sort of deal almost in in insurance in that way. It's we're trying to mitigate and prevent against the worst happening. You hope it never happens ultimately. So how do you display value in it? I mean, one of the angles that we've taken in some of the sectors we work in, particularly around the professional services sectors, so accountancy, law, finance, who are very sort of conservative generally sectors. They're very cautious around the way in which obviously they invest money and in the services that they do. So the way we always approach it with them is winding it back around cost of downtime to them. Let's break it down into your trading hours, what you are on a daily basis, what your current situation allows for, i.e., if you are breached by a phishing attack, and you're either faced with a situation where you have to, let's say, pay an attacker or restore from backups. How long is it going to take you at the moment? When was the last time you did a test of that backup? And if that's going to be 2, 3, 4 days, well, how much is it costing you to not be any business for 2, 3, 4 days? And actually, when you start to do the maths, particularly with lots of firms like law and accounts, where it's very high transactional, it becomes very, very clear very, very quickly that by actually writing some of these, by being preventative, by being cautious, by putting these measures in place, it's actually a drop in the ocean a lot of the time on what they would stand to potentially lose should they not take it seriously. And I think the other thing there is that while for many, many years, particularly in this country, less of a problem over in the States, you could have major outages for all sorts of things that are not to do with cyber, like earthquakes and tornadoes and floods. We have less of those problems in the UK. You might get a strong breeze, but generally speaking, the weather's pretty stable. Rains a lot, but you're not going to close an office over it. But in recent years, of course, with the increase in cyber, then it's very, very real. It's happening all the time. It's happening to all businesses, large and small, and the rate in which it's happening is increasing. So I think those two factors are sort of the kind of conversations we try to have around justifying the need for it.
No, I think just to add to that, obviously we when we have conversations with our customers and prospective customers, it's absolutely we use these models to give them exact value in dollars in terms of their downtime, but what you cannot translate is tangible, is your reputational damage. And for a lot of the businesses, that is, I mean, if they've lost that, then they will not be operating again, and it's the trust. And there's numerous examples. I mean, I think 2020 has been really, really busy in terms of cyber. I think on a weekly basis, we've seen 1 or 2, if not more, big names being breached all over the news. I won't say any particular ones, but yeah, absolutely. Reputational damage is to be considered as well.
There was a question here from Russell that takes us back to phishing, right? But so he mentions that he really like to see an increased facility to report phishing attempts by landline, mobile phone, email, or physical letters. And he's asking how long might it be before we are able to convene coordinated entities across countries to both educate and allow immediate reporting functionality. Yeah, I'd love to see that. That would be great.
So there is, and in the UK, we do have a reporting service. So report at phishing. Report at phishing.gov.uk. So you can report any phishing attacks on this government website, which again is the NCSC. So we do actually speak internationally. So yeah, we're not great at it from a police perspective, but we do have things like Europol, and we are getting better in relation to working with other organisations internationally and everything like that. But we do also as well, if we do see websites that are fake, we can actually take those down as well. So we can do that. It would just be a case of coming into a police force saying this website's fake, and we can get that pulled down for you. But there are resources there to do that.
Great. I actually just shared the link in the comments. But I am curious, how do you determine if the website is fake? What if have there been any takedowns of websites that were not fake?
So there is consortium, and there are, as Amy said, obviously from the government side of things and G2G kind of links, and also private sector works very closely. So all the security vendors share information with each other, their public databases, where these are updated not every day, like every hour, every second, as soon as any new vulnerabilities are discovered. And obviously, we work with another vendor who are leading cyber AI security provider, and again, that's another perspective where using the AI modules and machine learning in real time, I think there's a lot of advancement being done where everything's connected, and if there's any vulnerabilities picked up, they are distributed and shared with everyone else. So yeah, absolutely. I think, but as Tom said, I think it's a arms race where whatever defense mechanism comes out, there's always something that can beat them. There's another way out. So so I think one of the things to mention is on the dark web, there are now ransomware as a service kind of modules which anyone can go and buy and do attacks on anyone who they don't like, individuals. It's scary.
Yes, I like to live in my pink rose-colored glasses on, so I like to think it's all butterflies and flowers. But when people start talking about the dark web, I'm like, oh no, that's yeah, it's stuff like that scares me. But Nick, you touched on AI, and there was a question here from Kurt on saying AI promises to bring us greater levels of threat, whether from malicious individuals or state-sponsored acts. That being said, what can we look forward to with AI fulfilling its promise to act on our behalf and best interest? Specifically, what are technologies we should be keeping an eye on that will provide an early warning defense for the home environments, and I guess for corporations as well?
Yep, absolutely. I think this is something that we've been deploying heavily over the last few months, and one of the other vendors who are not with us today, but there are not just endpoint security mechanisms, but also a generic blanket cover. So these new technologies based on cyber AI, they provide you with more like a human immune system approach, where they would learn your behavior, they will learn your business users' behavior, and anyone you're interacting with. And based on that, they form a model based on AI that this is normal for you, this is allowed. And if they pick up on anything suspicious, and that includes your home users as well, especially in the current climate, they will flag that, and they put that in some sort of an isolation, protecting not just that particular user, but the whole, because that's typically how ransomware attack works, where once or a user is compromised, then that just spreads through the network. So cyber security mechanisms using AI, they're very, very active at the moment, and I would say watch this space. I'll message me separately, and I can talk more about the particular technology on the project.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Actually, I wanted to shift the discussion quickly for to talk about Databarracks. When I was preparing for the session, I was on the site, and it said that new research from Databarracks has revealed that 2/3 of organizations, so 66%, had no plans in place for responding to an infectious disease pandemic before the COVID-19 outbreak. And yeah, so I just wanted to get some comments around that, because that's a huge percentage that really didn't consider a pandemic. So,
yeah, so it's really and to clarify that, we do a huge amount of kind of research across our client base every year. We do our own data health check, and we speak to all of our our clients. We work at cross sectors and pick their brains on all sorts of different things, and we've been doing that for about 10 years. But obviously this year, it's really interesting to dig down into some of these conversations and see the disconnect. And actually, it's not just that figure. When you line that figure up with a couple of other things, it becomes even kind of more surprising. So yeah, the majority of our clients hadn't really considered or prepared for that properly. So that was really interesting, but also if you look at risk registers across a lot of Western cities, but particularly in the UK, places like London, actually pandemic serious flu global pandemic has been listed as one of the most likely very damaging events to take place. So of the bad things that could happen, that's actually one of the more likely events. It's been like that for a couple of years. So it's actually highlights a disconnect, not just in the readiness for particularly pandemic, but actually in the information that's being put out there by by governments, by official bodies, and then the perception of what is a risk to that company or those companies. So we definitely tried to bridge that gap and to sort of talk about the realities of things. But yeah, it highlights there's a huge disconnect between published risk registers and real likelihoods of attacks, and then also and how people prepare their businesses to deal with it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the statistics a year from now to see people are more prepared, or they're taking that into account.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think one of the things, there's a couple of things from this. One, it's there's been a few sort of false starts, if you like, for a few times over the last 2 decades where we thought that this could happen and it never quite did happen. And I think that led most built up Western countries to be underprepared, really, never taking it as seriously as perhaps they should on a business level. I think we've already seen a massive change in the conversations with our clients. So for an example, we might be giving one of our customers a pure backup service, but they're not maybe that interested in talking around, I don't know, their crisis communication plans or their risk registers or their incident response plans. And so we've had a massive uptick in how seriously people are taking the sort of proper holistic planning work and the processes and documentation to properly mitigate against all sorts of different risks, pandemic being one.
Yeah, thank you for that. We've got, I guess I'll take the last question here from the audience from Nigel. He's saying, with advances in AI, especially machine learning, internet service providers could prevent and stop at the source and provide the police with evidence to make successful prosecutions. Do you see any advancements like that? Maybe Amy could get started, since you're with the police. This is the first time with the police on a LinkedIn Live.
We're learning all the time. So, and every day is a new day, and there's new challenges that we face. So obviously we're trying to work with IT professionals because, first and foremost, most of us are police officers first, and then obviously we're learning IT. So actually we're looking to, getting involved like cyber specials. So people from the IT industry to come and help us understand technology that a little bit, because some, people in the IT world have lived and breathed it probably their whole entire life. So, we're trying to get that expertise. So something like that, absolutely, we would be looking at, getting some support in that area, definitely.
I'm sure there'll be, I think there's a lot of data that's already screened and shared, but there's always that nervousness around the compliance, and especially with the GDPR and other data protection regulations. So ISPs try and deal with this kind of thing carefully. But yeah, absolutely. I think as you mentioned in the question, that AI-based techniques will be used more and more. And yeah, what we've also been saying today is that these attacks are very sophisticated. So if they can sneak through several layers of defense, so they'll have to be very, very advanced AI algorithms to work to pick them up at that level.
There's also another interesting, conversation to have around when you talk about ISPs is where are those internet service providers hosted? Because these kind of attacks are happening for everyone, as we've just learned. 7-year-olds in bedrooms all the way through to very large state-funded attacks on other states. So when you talk about machine learning to sort of cut things off at the source, I think it's a really grey area, because malicious code and attacks are flying in all sorts of different directions, and in some directions they're being used sort of legitimately, if you want, on the behalf of the state, or certainly from their perspective. And on the other hand, they might be using illegitimately for kids. So I think it would be very, very difficult to distinguish between all of that, and also country by country would have a very different opinion, of what was or was not, legitimate, because of course everybody's got a different perspective and everybody's on the other end of it.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. I was speaking to a friend of mine who's head of security at this large, I can't say where, but they do marketing campaigns, and every now and then that causes a spike in the number of people visiting their site. And he said, well, a really successful marketing campaign is indistinguishable from a DDoS attack. So you see the challenge we have, and AI will get better and it will improve, and but it'll knock off some low-hanging fruit, and then the attackers will just switch their tactics up, and that goes back to that arms race again. We sometimes, I think, as an industry, also focus on some very highly technical but less likely attack vectors, whereas, like, phishing still works. Credential stuffing still is an issue. You can't get everyone to deploy MFA on their sites. You can't get all users to take them up everywhere. So that's why we're going to be in this constant state of flux. I think AI definitely has its uses, but it'll be a while before we get to any kind of utopian state where it's doing a lot of our work for us. I mean, I'd love for it to be there, and then I could just put my feet up and relax. But
okay, can I just ask Amy? I think on this subject, like, it'll be good to just learn from what happens in the real world. So, Amy, could you give us an example or a case study from your recent cyber crime investigations that you're allowed to?
And I'm allowed to say. Yeah, I mean, one of the recent ones we've had was a ransom, and it was they had actually gained access to the backups. So obviously they had managed to sort of do a phishing campaign, had managed to get into the backups in that particular business, and obviously their backup protocol wasn't as it should be. So the business did have to actually pay the ransom in the end, because they had no other option, because their business was completely offline. They had no other option other than to pay, which again we discourage, but we don't. It's down to the organisation whether they want to pay it or not. But we would say not pay it, but we can't tell them not to. So they obviously had to pay it, but it was a really sophisticated attack. Obviously the business didn't have a process in place around their backups, and I think we have seen that happen several times with lots of businesses, not just in Kent but across the UK, and it just seems something quite simple, that actually they've attacked that, and actually then they're completely on their knees and they can't do anything else but to pay. So yeah, that's what we've seen a lot. So yeah, that's kind of one of the ones we've seen regularly.
And is there any, just to add to that, is that so a lot of businesses and the prospects we speak to, they have this perception that bad guys go after the big fish. Now, what's your opinion and experience on that? I mean, is there a size that's, is it small, medium, large?
Yeah, so I have an analogy where I say, my daughter goes to a gymnastics class when lockdown wasn't here. So she used to go to a gymnastic class. So they are a small business. They have all my data. They have my data. They have my credit card details, etc., and everything about my child, medical histories, everything. And then I look at Amazon, for example, just as an example. They must have all the top cyber security in place, but they hold very little data on me. Who's a cyber criminal going to attack? That small business has got data. Their cybersecurity isn't that great, and that's who they're going to target. So actually, we see a lot of small businesses, micro businesses attacked because it's data they want. They want information. They want data to sell on. So they're going to target those small companies.
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing a large uptick in that over the last few years as well, because data is valuable, and like, organizations themselves, small businesses don't realize how valuable that data is. There's been cases of I think last year in Florida, there was a small plastic surgeon, like cosmetic surgeon's clinic that was breached. And they know they won't get a ton of ransom money from them, but they were like, hey, pay us, because we've also stolen your data, so we're going to sell that. And they started approaching some of their clients saying, we've got all your details here, pay us money, or we're going to sell your personal details, or your details of your surgery. We're going to publish it publicly. So it's there's a lot of places you can use that data, you can sell it on, and it just gets repackaged in like 4 or 5 different ways. So it's a really big economy there for the criminals.
I think
you guys are bursting my pink bubbles here with all this. It's so unfair. I mean, you know, these businesses are just trying to do their job, but I guess that's what you guys are all here for, right? Is to help prevent and fight and train individuals to be prepared. I think this was a really interesting session. I actually personally learned a lot and will be a lot more cautious when clicking on links and protecting my own website and backups. And I want to thank all of you for joining us live. Before we wrap up, I think it'll be helpful if each of the speakers just tells the audience where they can go to learn more information about the type of work you do, and if they wanted to continue the discussion, where are you most accessible? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Twitter? Is it email? What's your preference? So maybe we start with Nick, and then Amy, then Tom, and Javad. That's how you guys come up on my screen. So go ahead, Nick.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you for hosting this interesting conversation once again. And I think we're going to have a follow-up session for sure, because I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Hope our attendees have as well. So as your banner is showing, I think if you are interested in learning more about anything that we've covered today, please visit our website /my event that allows you to book a complimentary session, and you have access to our cybersecurity expert to talk anything that we've covered today. And also, if you want to attend future events, please like the LinkedIn page for Databox, and hopefully you'll have more interesting events. Thank you.
All right, and Nick, I've added a link to book time with you. If people wanted to book some one-on-one time, I added a link to your HubSpot there. So thank you for that. Amy?
So I'm probably the hardest person to get hold of, but I do have a Twitter page at Kent Police Cyber. So I try to keep up to date. So I try and tweet at least once a day. I manage that single-handedly by myself as well as everything else. So obviously bear with me, but I try to put on there everything I think is really relevant to business communities and individuals. So yeah, just keep that up to date as much as I can. So if you want to follow me on there, please do. And if you've got any queries, then just private message me on Twitter and I'll come back to you.
Perfect. Tom?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, first of all, thanks very much. Great session. I've really enjoyed this, and definitely look forward to having a continued conversation, learn a lot as well. Easiest way to get hold of me is probably through Nick and through the same thing. I provided a link through to the resources we have. We've got a couple of hundred different resources just on our own website, Databarracks.com. But as I said, all of that's available via Nick, and then directly, yeah, LinkedIn's probably the easiest thing. Drop me a message on there for sure.
So if you guys want Tom, you have to go through Nick first. That's what I got.
That's it. He's my human firewall.
I was just gonna say that. You took my joke. All right, perfect. And Javad, please let people know where to learn more and continue the discussion.
Sure. So thank you again for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, if you want to find out about KnowBefore, knowbefore.com, but go to Nick. He knows our products really well. He can talk to you about it. If you want to get in touch with me, you want to talk about bad movies or movies from the 80s, or just like tweet me and comment at me, you can find, I have my site on javadmalik.com, or on Twitter, it's J4VV4D is my Twitter handle, or LinkedIn, but I don't really use LinkedIn all that often, but you can message me on there. I just might take a few days to get back to you. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all again so much for taking part in this great discussion. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.